Hi there, Randy Green here, a little bit of HAL Changemaker project, because it is a project, but this is a little bit of update, a little bit of news, and I know many of you know this already, but in this line of work, which I've been doing since 2007, and I'm talking to people, and people are getting a lot of insights, they are sensing a lot of stuff, but it's always nice to get it confirmed, to get it supported. And that's the point of this little update, because I know many of you know this already. But let me just give you my angle on it and how I would verbalize what you're sensing and how I would put that into concepts and words, so you kind of have something to make choices upon, because this is where we are now. We are in the time of choices. We are ending 2022, which is a number 6. It's all about choices. This year has been where we kind of had, well, we could say, the last attempt to try and preserve the ways that things used to be, and how what we could say the remaining factions or the remaining divisions within the old world order, there's not many of them left. And now we are, unfortunately, on the very same timeline that quite a lot of the different groups, including the enhanced humans from the future, were trying to alter and change into something else, and did not work. So we are now on the original timeline that ended up in the future with realities that these groups that came from there were trying to avoid, but they have got what they needed, and they have technically spiraled off. They have changed their future, but we are still on the same trajectory. So those of us who are left now, we are going to do that path, and some of us will then become them. But since they have changed, those of us who will become them in the future, we have the possibility of changing too. So there is what we call a ripple effect. There has been, it's a very small one, but it's there. And when we look a little bit into the world news, I knew the outcome. Everybody knew the outcome. As Ms. Thunberg said very well, is the COP27 would be nothing but greenwashing. And I think she has come to terms with, in her maturing process, like all of us that are working and trying to change the world, we discover the complexity of things, that it's not enough just to create awareness around things. It's not enough just to go out there and drum the drums and rally and protest and say, oh, this is, and then expect someone to change or something to happen because we have said so, or we have raised concerns, or we have been trying to say things. And this is the me in my 50s and Miss Thunberg in her early 20s. I think she's 19 now or something. And I remember when I was 19 and what I thought, that if only I went out protesting, if only I met the political leaders, which she has accomplished. I must say that is, she just got a window of opportunity there, and she pursued it. And due to her special mindset, she achieved it, which is good, because she is definitely working in a different way. I'm not going to follow the classification that she has got from the established system, because I don't agree in that one, but she has definitely pushed it as far as even possible for a single human, meeting the Pope, almost become a celebrity, have created her own fund, and are assisting people that are trying to find solutions, environmental solutions, to continue what we could say a sort of reality for her age group. And I think that's that's probably the best solution that she has come to terms with. This whole kind of, don't focus so much on the establishment and the political organs, but go grassroots, go from beneath, bottom up. This is a bottom up change that we're going to make. And I agree in that one. That's how I worked when I was a young person as well. I worked with NGOs, and we're working from that angle, because I also came to realization when I was 15, after having done, I didn't meet the Pope though, or the presidents, or Schwarzenegger, or any fashionable people whatsoever. But I did realize quite quickly that the policymakers and politicians and career politicians, they are saying a lot of stuff, but at the end of the day, it's all about their political career. So they're using the political system to push their personal ego drivers in the forefront. Whatever they are doing is not really what we would perceive. We have that old-fashioned ideas that politicians, or used to be that my generation, thought that, oh yeah, politicians, they are the ones that are going to govern the world. They're going to do it for the greater good. I'll deliberately use that terminology, because that is what they were expected to do, run the country so that everybody can get whatever opportunity that they need. And this is the political system. And then you have one group that say, oh yeah, we want that to happen. You have the other group that says, no, we want that to happen. And then you have the discussions and all of these issues that follow with that, as we are seeing it in America and other places on the planet. And there's always this debate between the two wings, the two main groups, the red and the blues, and they're always fighting each other. And that's the political system. And I came to that realization, and it has not changed since, and I might be wrong, but I'm not seeing any indications of that it has changed at all, because we have these different head of state that are coming and going, and they are trying to put their mark on things. But what real true power do they actually have? When it all comes down to it, it's the bureaucracy. It's the Congress. It's the Senate. It's the ones that are running the everyday governance. And these are the bureaucrats, the ones with the university degrees that are doing the everyday business of running a country, not the head of state. He or she is just coming in, blasting in, do what they need to do. And I forgot what it's called in English. The ones that are working in the offices, the ones that are making the everyday business run, the factory, the governmental factory running on an everyday basis. And we have had it's very clear in Denmark that that's the way it goes, because we have had a lot of documentaries, and those of us who live in Denmark, we have a quite clear understanding of what's actually going on in our Senate. Let's just call it that, or our Congress. It's called something different in Denmark, but we have that clear understanding. Right now we have had election as well, and we technically still do not have a government, because the one that was there did not reach the majority of votes. So they are now working, the right wing and the left wing are now working to try and find some kind of in-between type of new governmental structure, which takes a lot of negotiations, and they will get there, because that's the way the future will be. Because in times of crisis and the things that we are up against, you can't have this political environment where everything is up to ridiculous discussions, just as we saw it in COP27, where everybody is just kind of trying to yield their own devices, in meaning that's the translation of a Danish idiom, as in kind of you're trying constant, whatever you're doing, whatever you are putting into that political arena is always tied up to a personal political agenda, and it all comes down to, we heard it again and again, that would be a political suicide. So they are not really trying to make things better for any of us. They're just trying to arrange themselves in a way so they are both playing the card on what the population want, what their voters want, and at the same time they are also making sure that they won't lose momentum and will sabotage their own political career. And I think it's actually exemplified very well in that movie that was made a couple of years ago, Don't Look Up. It's portrayed, Meryl Streep is completely nailing it there. I don't think it could be said more clearly, and that's the political environment. So let us just accept that and say, okay, you do your thing. but we don't expect much of you until you kind of come to terms with, and that will be what we call force majeure government in the future. We've seen a little bit of hint of, they've been test running it the last 3 years when we had the pandemic and when we went into this lockdown situation where we saw governments can actually act quickly when they're forced to do so, and they can come up with solutions if they are forced to do so. And that is unfortunately, I'm not saying it is that way because nobody knows the future, right? But there are tendencies that will be the governments in the future, where, as we're seeing it in New York right now, the state of New York, where you have snow, and you're seeing all of these things that are going on constantly, where things are not running smoothly, as we will go from one crisis to another. That's what I'm saying. Whatever the crisis will be, whether it's financial or it is food chain supply demands and not living up to this, or it is just production issues. We're seeing that all over the globe. Those of you who are following with the news and are just looking a little bit here and there, you can see that everybody's preparing now for a different scenario. We are having where the major companies used to place all of their, for instance, Apple, let's take that as an example. They had a lot of things that were produced in China, but due to the pandemic, and the locking down of China, the constant locking down of China, they can't rely on getting their little gadgets from China. So they're moving the production back to the Americas. And they should never have moved it out anyways. But those of you who are young, you don't know this because the history is not what's been talked much about on the social media. Sorry about that, but it isn't. That's where many of the youngsters get their information stream from. But the matter of the fact is that I grew up with that in the 2000s, especially. We began this whole outsourcing. It was already in the 1990s, but in the 2000s, it was all about outsourcing. Whatever could be outsourced to some production country that could do it on a cheaper rate. And we had a lot of fear going on back then. Then the fear was that we would all lose our work, and everything, all factories and everything would be licensed or outsourced to what we call developing countries, because the workforce, they had to pay less salary, everything was cheaper, they had good tax arrangements. So everybody kind of, which is condemnable, seriously. It's kind of just shows how businesses run. They're all for profit. This whole kind of whatever we do, will produce as much as possible for the lowest cost as possible, and at the same time earn as much money as possible. And if that means that we are destroying the world in our quest for a high profit, low cost, and as much leverage as possible, then we'll do that. And that's the general baseline concepts within businesses, big businesses, especially the older type. So we need new people or new ways of driving business. We need people with new ways of driving business and new people on the scene, literally. But that's coming. That's the next generation of you youngsters out there. That's what I want to talk about. And there are different choices to be made, all depending on your age. We can't say it's the same choice for all, because it isn't. It depends on where you are in life and how you perceive life and how quick you are to adapt to changes. And young people are quicker to adapt to changes because they have not yet formed completely their neural network into different comfort zones. They're still on the exploration journey, figuring out who am I, what do I want from life. And it's very confusing and it's very fear-provoking. When I was younger, and this whole maturing into becoming who I am today has been a very, very long journey. But that's part of life, growing up and realizing that things might not be so innocent and so simple as we thought it were when we were kids. And that's part of the difficult maturing process. And some succeed and some doesn't. Some just kind of bail out and say, no, it's too difficult, and becomes alcoholic or addicted to weed or cannabis or whatever to escape reality, to just get through the day because it's too much hassle. Life is too hard. And yes, life is fucking hard. And that's the challenge. And you know, I'm a mother, so I am, of course, working that with my own little offling and doing the very best I can to support my offling in these processes, because I didn't have that support. I always say grew up amongst wolves. In some way I would actually, it would have been better to do so, because at least there would be some caring there. Not that my parents didn't care about me, but they were enormously absorbed in their own ways and in their own, these are parents of the 60s, and they were all about their own psychological processes and their own whatever. And I can't really say that my father is probably what I would say the most grown up of the two, but not really when I look back. Fortunately, my father has been filmed, actually, because he had his specific interest that where he was part of some documentaries. And by that, I've seen my father when he was in his 40s, and he's just a kid. He is just a kid. I'm looking at that 40-year-old say, yeah, no wonder you bailed out. No wonder you left that family, because you are mature. No, you're not a grown up. And he's whatever he is today. He's in his rut. He's in his neural network calcification. He's in his 80s now. So it's just things are what they are. You can't teach an old dog new tricks, right? So it is what it is. And it's fine. He has done his part within this civilization. And my mom, she remained and still is, psychologically speaking, she's a 5-year-old. So that's kind of what I grew up with, being the most adult in our family. So that's including my sister. She's what she is. So you just kind of a little bit of family structure there. But anyways, it's not where I wanted to go. It's just to say that those of you who are young, and if you think the grown-ups are grown up, you're absolutely wrong, because they might age outside. But when we talk about the psychological structure, most grown-ups are still kids. They have never really done that extra development of their frontal lobes. They kind of just got to that point where the frontal lobe were all about pleasure seeking. So whatever they ignited from the instinctual layer to the limbic system, emotionally driven, into the frontal lobes, that should have given them a kind of personality structure that would make the right choices and do the right things. You will discover as you grow older, they might look older, but how old are you? 13, 14, 15. People never really mature. They never really grow up. In their 20s, a lot they become parents. And then it's all about focusing on that other little thing. And not many are continuing their psychological process of maturing. They're not becoming wise elders, which we saw in the olden days, where being in a tribe out on the savannah, just to use that one as an example, there it was generally accepted that life was hard, that life was difficult, because you had death right there all the time, and you were struggling with things. You were struggling for survival, and you were struggling with, okay, how do I get through life? And I know I can't take the way that Danish people are and project it to the rest of the world population, because just to put one thing in example, which was part of a conversation I had the other day, when my kid was little, I always let her go on when we were out walking on a pathway and there was a street, then I always pushed her to the inner side of the pathway, and I would go close to the street. So if there were a car that would come up and do something weird, because you never know what happens, suddenly you're walking there on the pavement and you think everything is good and fine, and then a guy or a girl or whatever lose control of the car or fate or whatever, and they just crash into you and you're dead, and that's life. I just read in the news today a woman waiting for the bus, just waiting there, and a car did exactly that. That happens. That's life. So I already knew that, and she grew up with that. She never thought much of it, other than kind of, that's just how we do it. And we had that conversation. If you live in Mexico or something, that's typical that males go on close to the street and protect their females, because there you have all of that raiding and cars just driving up and snatching your purse or whatever. So it all depends on where you live in the world. And those of us who live in an environment, and such as in Denmark, where things are neat and orderly, it is falling apart now, but it used to be that way. there we had this whole generation of people growing up with no danger and no real struggle about anything. There's always people that struggle with things. Yes, we have poverty in Denmark as well. Yes, we have alcoholism in Denmark, and we have sexual abuse, and we have all of that stuff that's part of life. And you remember, I work with drug addicts. I have worked as a psychotherapist for many years. So I know that the shadow side of life that many people try to pretend is not there, as in all depending on your life circumstances. And I do believe in the Western world, we have larger portions that of humanity that are not accustomed to the challenges of life. And many of you youngsters, you are still wherever you grew up. Of course, you've grown up in homes with abuse, whether it's mental or emotional or sexual. You are having completely different perception of life. You grew up with hardship, and then you're struggling with that. You're looking through the lenses of what's been done to you and the unfairness of it. And why are you positioned in that family? Why are you experiencing these things? I thought about that as well when I was seeing the other kids at school. The school I attended, there was a lot of rich kids. Why did they have all of that money? We had nothing. I went to school with my own clothes. I was bullied by it. They were, Rand is always walking in the same pair of trousers. Because yes, I only had one pair of trousers. Whereas the other kids, they would come in literally every day with a new pair of trousers, and they would look all fancy and fashionable and whatever. And I would come showing up in my old clothes. So of course there was this division in my primary school as well. And from up until 10th grade, because we have a different school system in Denmark as well, compared to you have primary school, middle school, and high school. And we just have kind of one school that goes from kindergarten and into 10th class or 10th grade. So we have a different school system. So that's why it's kind of middle school. I would say that's where the bullying is worst. It's when we come into what you see as high school, norms a little bit different in Denmark. We don't have high school as such, so we don't have to begin all over where we kind of find our social structure. We are in the same classes that we already had when we were in middle school. So therefore, we are not brought to new schools and new environments where you have to begin all over, because I think that's the problem with, for instance, when you do this division where you go to new schools, when you shift schools, for some it's good, for others you have to earn your right within the hierarchy one more time. It's called socialization. And youngsters and that age, like baboons, you have to arrange yourself in the power hierarchy of who's on top and who's on the bottom. It's group dynamics. It's a biological group dynamics between mammals. I'm sorry about comparing humans to baboons, but it is what's going on. And youngsters that are still not in their frontal lobes are still very, very ruled by the same areas of the brain that we are seeing amongst many tribal-oriented mammals. Sorry about that. I do apologize. I know humans would like to see themselves as being much more advanced. But if we were kind of taking that into, and I would suggest you study some of the material of Robert Sapolsky, because he's giving a lot of good examples on that one, and he's more clever than me on that level because he's been studying baboons for a long time, and he has taken all of that understanding into his neuroscience and working with human behavior. But it would be easier if we understood and prepared our youngsters for what's actually, if they had really mature parents, grown-up parents, then it would be easier for young people when they were attending school, because they would have been trained in now when you begin at school, primary school, you can't explain that to a 7-year-old kid, right? But you can as they come home with experiences. And I actually did that with my offling, and we can discuss whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. It did not take away the sting of the group dynamics and the bullying and how kids are, because kids are tough. I used to be afraid of the boys and whatever, and I wore glasses, and I was a nerd, so you kind of figure that one out. So I was always targeted, and I remember going home from school, and they were making snowballs, and they were putting stones in the middle of the snowballs, and they had that kind of sport that if they could hit you in the face and knock off my glasses, then that would be the win of the day. And that kind of baboon flock animals of young males that don't have an alpha that tells them this is the right or the wrong thing to do. Seriously, it's kind of, that's the only way that for me it makes sense to look at people that way. And when we talk about Miss Thunberg or Greta Thunberg, she has this slight Asperger syndrome where she is looking at reality from a different point of view because her neural network works differently. And the way she approaches things kind of, yeah, I get that. So I probably have a little bit Asperger structure as well. So with that in mind, just to put things in context, it's so easy to put diagnosis on different types of people that are not fitting the norm. But I don't fit the norm, and it has taken me a long time to figure out how do I then navigate in life. And that's the process of growing up, of maturing. And you can say, why are you putting all that psychology in here? I don't want to know that that's kind of world news. But if you want to understand the dynamics of world news and why things are not moving in any direction, you have to understand the matter. The fact is, as hear me telling you that, oh, I know it all. I don't. But my perspective of things are, of course, it's because we don't have grown-ups out there. We don't have mature, highly developed psychologically, physiologically, philosophically, financially, economically, whatever you want to put on it, develop people that are running the countries. We are having children driving the car. And that's also what Ms. Thunberg said to these world leaders. You are acting like children, because they are children. And that is very clear for those of us who are, whether it's actual walk-ins or impressions from different alien groups or whatever's been going on. There has been this very, very long attempt to try and teach humanity different ways and forms of, okay, you need to do this and that, whatever. And it appears we are in the kindergarten, and these kids are not very receptible to change and receptible to do things in a different manner. The brain is sluggish, as they like to say. So that is what it is. They are, as those of you who've been with me in my other material, when I began this work with some of the Andromedan groups, the first thing they told me was, you need to develop your neural network. You need to develop your brain. If you want to understand how things work, you need to study. And then they put me on a long journey of studying things. As I've said other places, I was up studying 5 books a week, from quantum sciences to everything that I could think of. And the goal was not for me to learn all of that in a linear fashion. The goal was to exercise my neural network so that once they began showing me these downloads, telepathic downloads of information, then my network in the brain would have enough different types of items to connect to that information. So, because that's the way the brain works. The brain has to have some kind of, it's like a computer. It's like a computer. It is not a computer, but it's similar. It works in the similar way as a computer does. It has a lot of information bits that once it's excited in a specific type of energy, then all of these bits work together like a little, and then connect the dots, and then it comes up with a pattern which you then can interpret, all depending on how well you are to interpret your information system, neural network complexity structures of your brain as it fires off in these different networks, where it gathers specific types of energies that are coded with specific type of information. And science still doesn't really know how that works. How does neural network processing, the firing between the synaptic gap or across the synaptic gap amongst the synapses, how does that actually change from being this weird gel-like thing full of blood and firing? How does that become an image? How does that become a thought? They can see how it works. They can see, oh yeah, now that part of the brain is working. But how does it actually work? How does it take that firing and transform it into an image, transform it into something that we can call mathematics or psychology or what have you? Translation of this firing, these energies into concepts and frameworks of information that actually make sense to us. Similarly as when I've been traveling a lot, but not a lot, but I've been traveling around to different countries, including Israel. And I've talked to many people around the planet, listened to many different languages. And I always kind of, when you listen to languages that are enormously foreign, that's not logically having the same type of sounds as we have it in Danish or English or in Netherlands or Germany or whatever. There's always little words here and there you can kind of interpret. But when I was in Israel, it was very, very dissimilar, although I kind of knew something already. But I was working as an au pair, by all things, by all means, right? And the kids actually taught me this weird, they were accustomed to having au pairs, which of course psychologically they were damaged by it. They had these shift of au pairs, so they never really got to do this attachment, which kids need. So they had a lot of abandonment issues, and you had to earn their trust and all these things all over again. So that was not an easy task either. But they were accustomed to au pairs coming in, not really understanding. So they had developed this weird mix of a language between English and Hebrew, or it's kind of Aramaic, but today it's not called Aramaic. It's called Ivrit in Israel. So it's not Hebrew, it's Ivrit. That's their version of it today. So they had created that blend of it where we learned to talk to, and I learned different words within the Ivrit language so they would understand what I meant. So we created our own language. And I know I think it's the Creole language that was created by certain slaves in, can't remember where is it. I forgot the name of it. Sorry about that. In some of these, what is it called? That city in America where this jazz music, I can't remember what it's called now. Sorry about that. That was completely lost in my brain because I'm thinking about something else. But language is interesting, and it's not out of disrespect. I've just forgotten it. Sorry about that, people. But there is this, language, and this, again, I'm sorry I'm going that way. The point with that language and that idea was that when things are too foreign for us, we don't understand it. We don't have certain things within the brain that can connect the dots and kind of make analogies, associations, as in kind of you hear that and then you associate it with something and then you kind of understand whether it's real or not, or whether it's actually or not, or it is that way. That's where we need to talk to each other and actually figure out, okay, I'm envisioning that. Is that actually what you are and what you're experiencing, what you are sensing? And that is where you can say a psychotherapist learns to listen and learns to ask the right questions and understand the other person as the other person is, where most people are actually projecting all the time. They hear this and hear that, and then they oppose their own understanding of things, and they see what they want to see so they don't have to change. But because it all comes down to that. So with that long explanation, it's kind of, Randy, why do you always have to explain everything? Because this is damn important that you understand why things are not changing, because it should be the simplest thing in the world. You have well leaders that come together, and everybody knows, yeah, the world is on fire. Just use the terminology of Greta Thunberg again. Everything is going south. Why the beep, 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 beep? Can't they just come together? All they come up with is, oh yeah, we'll create a fund, a damage fund, so that we will continue our stupid ways, but now at least we will pay you off so you can repair, so you can create technology, so you could do whatever. Here we are destroying the world, but yeah, we have enough money, so we'll pay for the cost of our stupid ways. That's all they could come up with. And that's okay. That's a start. That's at least something, but so many days. And it's like, what is going on in the mind of these people? We did have Greta Thunberg that actually addressed them a year ago and said, if you don't do anything, then things will go really, really bad. And it has gone worse. And yet they're still not. We should have seen that group of world leaders coming out, having agreed on doing this and doing that and doing this and doing that and doing quickly, because they now know they can because of the pandemic. But no, there's still this political suicide, not mature, grown-up responsibility, take on the matters, as we're seeing it with all elections, all political systems. So that leads us into that understanding that those of us who are concerned about the future of humanity, we need to go other ways. We have now seen the political system fail again and again and again and again and again. And they failed when I was young. They are still fucking failing 40 years later. So don't expect anything from the political leaders. They're running their own little world where they are running on personal drivers. They are running on what they need to do to preserve their political career. That's what they're doing. Whatever they're saying is just hot air, as we call it in Denmark. You're promising and nobody's living up to whatever they're promising. Plus you have this head of state that's only there for 4 years. How much change can you actually put in motion in 4 years? Well, if the shit has hit the fan and the chair is on fire, yeah, then you can move. But until that happens, as long as it's business as usual and the office is not on fire, well, then we can do it tomorrow, right? We'll do it another day. We'll do it in 5 years or whatever. And that's the worst thing that we can do as humans. The moment we think I'll do it tomorrow, or the moment we think I'll do it when the time is right, or I'll do it in 5 years or whatever, then it's lost. When we are to instigate change, it needs to be now, and we need to begin it now. We know it's a process. We know it will take time, but we will begin it now. We will make the solutions now. We will follow through with the solutions now, not tomorrow. No mañana. So that's the difference. And that's what I wanted to talk about. But I wanted to give you that psychological understanding so you don't get disappointed, because now I need you to mature. I always said that. I need you to mature, because those of us who are going to do the transition, we need to be grown-ups. Can't be kids. Kids cannot create changes, because kids might be stubborn and kids might think they know it all, but they don't understand the complexity of the world, as Putin so kindly told Greta Thunberg as well. You don't understand the complexity of the world, and that's where the mature people come in. But we're not going to use that as a bad excuse of why we can't change. On the contrary, that's where the change maker comes in. We use that understanding to understand the dynamics of the complex systems that we are trying to change. So we'll say, okay, you say it's a complex world. I know it's a complex world. It is a complex world. So how does that complexity work? We know there are huge portions out there of people that doesn't want to change. We still have climate crisis deniers, for crying out loud. They're still there. When I do it from a logical perspective, it's kind of, what are you observing? Oh yeah, you got that explanation, because it all comes down to explanations. You see, this is where the problem with knowing stuff becomes another bad excuse of why not to do stuff. Just because you know a certain thing of information that tells you this is reality, you still need to do a reality check. But most people, as we're seeing within different communities with different types of agendas and different types of perspectives, whether it's within what we call far right or far left or in between or whatever it is, the moment people have made a specific type of belief system, it's called a cognitive scheme. They link up their emotions to it. I've talked about that before. They are identifying themselves with their belief system. It becomes part of who they are and working in the same manner. And then they stop being flexible. They stop seeing the world as it is, because now they know what it's all about. That's how the brain works as well, because it is resource allocating. The brain works to find the answers. Once it's found the answers, it stores it, and then it creates neural networks around that. It creates fatty tissue around that neural network. And then it says, that's the one we're running from, because I need to preserve whatever energy I get, because the brain uses 20% of the energy of the body. And if people are around doing all sorts of sexual endeavors and are doing a lot of things at work, and they're always focused in the outer reality, living up to all sorts of weird requirements and all sorts of weird challenges and all sorts of weird, expectations of what it means to be humans within this base program, social structure, institutions. This is how humans are supposed to behave. Well, then you're using a lot of energy on that one. So therefore, the brain doesn't get what it needs. It doesn't get that time where you're seeing that with great thinkers, as I do as well. For days when I'm thinking a lot, I'm literally just sitting on my chair or lying on my bed the entire day while I'm just letting my brain use the energy it needs to think certain issues through. That's part of my projects, where I go into this theta state where I literally just let my brain do what it needs to do, and I observe it while I'm asking questions, and then it can expand into the other realities where I will then get the information I need, and then I can begin put it into a project, and then my brain technically switches off. And then I just run on the energy imprint that I have got. And that is what I got from the grace of the Andromedan grace, because that was what I needed to learn. How do you actually work with your brain so you can think these great ideas, mature it more and more, build the neural networks, and at the same time also preserve your body. So I know to switch between, okay, now I need to exercise, now I need to do this. So now I'm in my body, and I learn to do it as efficiently as possible. I learn to give it the fuel it needs of a high level of glucose of fruit. I give it a high level of fruit and a lot of water, a lot of fluids, what my brain needs to work. And then I have this, okay, now I go into the other modality where I'm thinking. So I've arranged myself in a way where I can become the thinker, and then I become the doer, and then I become the observer. So I have these different features, which I then arrange my body so, because I know it's limited the amount of energy I have. And I've learned to work that way. That does not mean that I work in boxes, but it means that I focus on one thing at a time. And I think if we want to say what Asperger could be, I'm not saying it is, but some of the ones that are diagnosed with Asperger, some of them do have what we call a neurological flaw due to the hybridization programs. And that's a whole other thing. I'm not going to go down that path, but that's my perspective on it. Not that they are anything wrong within whatever. Technically, we could assist them and help them, especially if the therapists that were working with people that have different degrees of Asperger syndrome, they can, if they are actually able to do telepathic lock on, they can actually help to assist these people in upgrading and rearranging the neural structure, and teach them via certain cognitive tools that have not been invented yet, but it will come. They will then, via that telepathic energy lock on, it's similar as a healer, you go in and merge fields, you will be able to assist them to rearrange the neural network so it works correctly and remove some of the spliced in genetics that are dysfunctional. That's how I see it. And it's not there yet, and I'm not capable of doing it. I just know that will come in the future when we have people that are neurologically different. They will be stronger, because that's some of the future humans that will be inserted into our reality field. They'll be able to do that. They are hybrids themselves as well. I'm not a hybrid, so I can't do it. But I know it's going. That's how they are going to repair that one. Right now, they just kept a lot of people dormant with different forms of drugs, but that will come in the future. So let me just put it that way. So those of us who have that hint, or that little thing that could be diagnosed as something, whatever, it's just because our brain works differently. And part of our maturing process is to figure out, how does it work? What is the right way of living for us? And I know I've come out saying we need to do this and that, whatever. And I sounded a little bit insane while I was doing it, but that's because we were in that run phase where if we are going to change things, we need to do something dramatically, and we need to do it now. We need people that are literally going on their own, doing energy work and all these kind of things. And all of that fell apart because nobody really want to leave everything behind to save the world, right? That's what lunatics do. So that's, or cults. And that's not where we are anymore. That's that's off the table, because that didn't work. We didn't reach the deadline. We haven't reached the 1.5 degree raise. We are now above it already. And next year will be even worse, and the year after, and on and so forth. So now we are in a different scenario. And that's what I want to continue talking about in the next podcast. And please listen to the next podcast as well. Thank you.